Okay, we're going to bring this Board of Finance meeting to order for December 18th. Call to order attendance, Mike Anderson, Chair, Dan Smith, Vice Chair, Carl Johnston, Gary Nino, Amy Friend as alternate, Lou Gingerella, and Winona Burdine, also an alternate. I'll seat you for Sarah. We also have in attendance, we have Bob Carlson, Board of Selectmen, and Stephanie Mastriani, the Board of Education. In comes Sarah Nelson. Thanks for your service, Winona. Any public comment? Nothing online, nothing in the room. All right, on to the fourth iteration of our 2025 Board of Finance meeting schedule. I was remiss in coordinating with the Board of Ed on their meeting schedules. We had some conflicts. So we changed to the 15th and the 29th on January. March, we do have some conflicts, but we're going to work around those when the time comes. Those are our major budget season meetings. We had August, we moved to the 20th. On September, we moved to the 3rd and 17th. In October, the 1st and the 15th. And that's it. Okay. Well, that's really, we can't really do anything about that. So I think we'll be fine. But thank you. Go ahead, Bob.
Mike, you said you changed January 8th to 15th?
I changed it to the 15th and the 29th.
Right. So I had that as we're going to present capital to you on the 8th, so we just move it to the 15th. That's
Yes,
okay.
please.
Okay.
Yes. The first meeting, we usually have the first Wednesday, and that's on the 1st, which is New Year's Day. So we just moved it to the 15th and 29th. And the 29th, we will have our presentation from the library.
So,
And most likely, we're going to have Daryl on that date as well, if he's not ready by the 15th. Go ahead.
I'm confused why we're rejiggering the schedule. I'm okay with it. I have no issue with it, but the message came out that we had a conflict with the Board of Education's meeting nights. And they were still kicking that around after you sent that note. So I'm like, who's zooming who here? No pun intended.
I don't know. I mean, they submitted theirs. I don't know. That was November 14th. So we finalized ours after that.
Yeah, but they just rejiggered theirs again. So we should probably make sure we're all on the same page.
So we're on the same page. Historically, Gary, you guys are the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays, and we're the 2nd and the 4th Wednesday. And so I created our regular schedule around the 2nd and the 4th Wednesday. We do have some dates during budget season where we've made a Monday meeting. There's one date where we'll be meeting on a Monday in that room. There's a Wednesday that we conflict with, like last year. We'll meet from 5:30 to 7 before your meeting. When Jen sent us the email, it just really identified the conflicts with you guys taking the 2nd and the 4th, or the 2nd instead of just one of those things.
This isn't helping. It's making my head hurt.
I think it's just historically we stuck to our schedule. You guys deviated a little and we figured it out and everything's good.
Okie dokie.
Okay.
I didn't understand because we got the note from Mike saying we had conflicts with the Board of Ed. And then I listened into your meeting the other night and you went through your calendar like we are right now. I'm like, oh my.
I was just with mine.
Okay. Okie dokie.
I'll move to accept the schedule for 2025.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, guys. I will sign this. Amy? Thank you. I'll submit that to Antoinette. I can actually give it, can I give it to you to give it to her, or? Does she mind if I just scanned it and emailed it to her? I want to just send out the official one to everybody. Thank you. Yeah. Unless you can do the 15th. Okay. All right, on to item number 4, general government financials. So congratulations, Board of Selectmen, on getting, and Bob, to getting the last year's all, although it's unaudited, it's P&L through the closeout from last year. So kudos to Melissa and you all. I did make some highlights, and one thing is just the general property taxes was at 97.8%, which is why we budget at 98% and not 100%. Just reminding everybody. So we're pretty good there. Obviously, we did better on past property and everything like that. Zane did a good job, in the attorney, of getting past taxes. I had a question on A301 LoCIP current. Was there a reason why we didn't get $33,000? We're down 69% on 69% on that.
To check, but I think that was one of the things we moved to the transfer station when we purchased the truck with the appropriation. We moved it to there. I think we're due to get, there's 2 checks we're waiting for. One is a LoCIP check and one is the steep grant from 2022-23. Everything else we have received.
Okay.
So I'll check on that for you, Mike.
Do you want to just discuss that topic at all, about that? What's the situation on that?
Which the steep?
Yeah.
So 22-23, we did 3 roads in Kingswood Meadowwood and the parking lot across the street from the school where they have the basketball courts. And at the time, we thought everything was compliant. We turned out that a company called Pastriac, who does our roads, who did our roads up to that point, was not CHRO compliant. We got some pushback from the state. When Christine and Sue Pike were still here, they were told by the state that we will definitely get the money. We're trying to get Pastriac compliant. Pastriac still is not compliant, but it's not on us. It's just the state is dragging their feet. I put a call into a woman named Hoween Flexer yesterday. I've not heard back from her, and I know Suzanne's working on this diligently. So it's just a matter of when we're going to get it, not if we're going to get it. I don't know about the steep grant, though. I mean, the LoCIP, however.
Okay. So when that does come in, does that go into the general fund?
Goes in, well, we would go back into undesignated fund.
Yeah,
That's
that's
where
what
it
I'm
came
saying.
out.
It would go in the undesignated fund?
Yes,
Okay. But on the books, would it be from 2022 or when it's realized?
when it's realized. It doesn't go back, it will go into the fund now as it is, because that's a fund that's it's a living document. It's a fund that things come and go from it all the time, so. It came out 2 or 3 years ago and we took it out, but it's never going back in. And
Okay.
we had it, excuse me, if you looked at, like it was last year, the year before last budget, not the one now, the one from last year, it was actually in there. Sue Pike put it in there as revenue. It never came in. This year, I told Melissa, do not put it in unless we know we're going to definitely get it between now and June 30th. I don't want to represent revenue that we think we're going to get And and I don't want to, same thing with the steep grant right now. We haven't spent any money on the steep grant right now. So there's no sense to put it in there until, we can't get it back until we spend it. So why put it in there?
Right. That's how we would like it.
Just trying to be more transparent with the numbers and not guessing, oh, we should get this, and then it doesn't come in, then we have to explain why we don't have it.
Right. I'm just looking at numbers that jumped out, and sometimes they're small dollars, but I just want to point them out for budgetary purposes going forward. A505 inland wetlands was at 63%. This is still on revenue side. Budgeted 600, got 378.
It's inland wetlands, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay, so that, and it's not big numbers, but when you're doing a budget on land use, you're not always sure what it's gonna come in for fees and penalties and permits and so on. So if you look at most cases, land use is right on the ball. Actually, we've made quite a bit of money, but there's some areas that just didn't come up to where they needed to be.
I'm looking at last year's.
I think you're looking at the closeout, right?
Yes.
Okay, please don't make me talk about this year yet. We should get through last year. One thing you skipped, Mike, we had a windfall on A3.30 with municipal revenue. That was when the state government realized they had more funding than they needed. They gave back to the cities and towns. It was a one-time only. It wasn't budgeted for. That's why it's an all revenue increase for $130,000, 130, 380. We will not get that this year. It was a one-time deal.
Okay. That's good. That's A3.30 if you didn't hear that.
Correct.
Sorry, we're looking at July 23 through June 2024. This is last year's closeout, unaudited. Now we're into expense. The grant writer was very low. Is that because we didn't have one? And Emily
We
was,
didn't use him. So we had a part-time grant writer that was 2 budgets ago, I think was getting 12,000, and we dropped them down to 10 and to 5. Previous administration used him more, but it was, when I came on, I said, I'm not gonna have you write grants for frivolous things the town really doesn't want, AKA the electric truck for the highway department. So, and then he had a job with the state. He ended up getting more work with the state. He told me he would only work on things we've done in the past, like steep grants. He didn't want anything new. We've since talked to another person in town that's gonna be working with Suzanne about more grant writing. I think the one thing that we can do, this current administration can do, is put more effort into grants. So we're already starting to we had a meeting with Emily Lewis, who writes grants, with Suzanne Thero. I think if we can concentrate on grant writing over the next 2 years, it would be a big plus for the town, because there's a lot of towns that get grants and we just haven't had the ability to get them at this point.
okay. Are we gonna budget for that?
Not yet, so there's enough. I'm gonna see how things go between now and June in the current budget. There's $3,500, I believe, in there for that. Emily said that should be fine for between now and the end of the year. If it makes sense that we're going to get thousands of dollars in grant monies, it might make sense to bump it up during budget season. I will say this, though, sometimes grants are, they make you think you want something that you really don't want. You know, so it's, it's such a good deal, we should get it. But then you realize, like that electric truck, I mean, it sounded like a good deal until we almost got it and realized it was going to cost us another $400,000. So, so sometimes it's too good to be true, you know, so you don't need to write grants for everything, but when you see something you really need, whether it be so for maybe the fire department, the town building, things like that, then we should look at them more closely than we have in the past.
Okay. Suzanne's salary as the Director of Administration and Finance, that includes her grant writing.
Grant writing's a part of her job description, yep.
Sorry,
Well, not so much grant, it's more grant administration than writing, actually.
yeah, so the question, you said there's $3,500 left for grant writing. Who's gonna do the grant writing?
Emily Lewis is gonna help us with grant writing, who's written
She's
many
a grant
grants.
writer?
Yes, she's done a lot of grants, especially for nonprofits, but she can do grant writing for us.
Okay.
She's willing to do it. We met with her last week, I think it was.
B-2201 is leasing of equipment. We were at 72% on that. Budgeted 7,500 and spent 5,400.
Okay, so that leasing of equipment falls into things like copy machines, that type of thing. So we don't own the copy machines, we lease them.
Yeah, we do too.
Yeah, but I think that we've got a pretty good crew now that doesn't overuse things. We're not just making copies for the sake of copying them.
Like I said, I'm just pointing out stuff, as we go forward for this new budget season.
No, agreed. One thing that I wanted to point out, and I'm sure Gary would appreciate it, was on the 2206, we underspent what we budgeted by quite a bit of money.
I was looking at that. We budgeted 151 and,
We budgeted 85,000.
oh yeah,
We spent 57,067.
yeah, I had that highlighted, 67%.
Oh, I don't need, I shouldn't open that can of worms, sorry. Exactly. We did have some savings in some personnel, obviously, in the IT line. We also saved some on the last fiscal year with the planner because we didn't have a planner until January 1st. Saved some money on the admin finance officer because that was empty for 4 months or so. I mean, those are things I don't want to save money there because I don't want to have holes in the town hall anymore, but we did happen to have those last year.
Can you explain the variance in B-2604, the state troopers?
It's just that we have the trooper that was here before Wayne went up to D. We have a new trooper, Alex Horner, who's much younger and is at a higher, should be a lower scale. That came in for the second half of the year. So I think that's probably what kept that down. Wasn't as much fringe. And it wasn't as much overtime.
So the way that this is broken down, we have annual service, overtime, miscellaneous, and then is it B-2604 other, which was budgeted at 0, which, what's going on with that line item, I guess?
2604.
So at the end, so we've got B-2604, and then we've got 041, 042, 048, and then the last line says state troopers other.
And there was 0 there.
Yeah, and but it looks like there was a budget of 385, so
No, that's
That's for the total budget.
That's the total
for
budget.
all of them.
Yes. I don't know why it's listed like that, Winona. It seems like it shouldn't be there. It should be, it's also the same thing at the line underneath the bar. So I
Right.
don't know why it's there. But it's all set by the it's a, we're not showing it as being spent or it's picked up in that bottom line, the line underneath that.
I agree. It's just wonky. Thank you.
There's quite a few that it does that, where you have a zero expense and all the budgets on that line item, but it's kind of like Excel, when you expand it all, you'd see it all. Yeah.
I suggest too, Mike, is since we're gonna be getting these now on a regular basis from Melissa, we should either quarterly or semi-annually, I don't mind coming in and see where we're at halfway through. Like if we start July 1st, so after January 1st, sometime in January, if you want me to come in and see where we're at halfway through this budget, be glad to do this.
Yeah.
And Suzanne will be back, so she'll be able to do it with me, so. Yep. Suzanne, if you think I misspoke, jump right in.
B27.24 water sampling was at 86%. I'm sure that you don't know exactly what's going to happen with that.
You want me to comment on that? What number was that, Mike?
It's B27.24. Is that for the various lakes and stuff?
No, we have to have our water sampled up at the highway garage, the transfer station, buildings around town has to be sampled on a regular basis.
Okay.
We've saved money there because our, the consultant we have, Bill Wazika, he does a lot of that himself for the town, and when the town does it himself, we don't have to pay fees.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this earlier about the land use department. Is that because of the planner? We had budgeted 210 and spent 173.
I think part of it was the planner, part of it was permits were up. So we're earning more money there. I think it's a combination of things. The town has been in the growth mode since COVID. But we did not have a planner for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, so we used a part-time planner from the CCOG.
Now, the water, B35053, water sewer analyst.
That's Bill Wazzigo I was speaking about. So he only gets paid when he works. We budget him for 10 hours a week. Sometimes he works 4 or 5 hours. He's not one just to sit around and gab and twiddle his thumbs. If he's not working, he's not here. So, but he's so valuable because he's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, I remember you talking about
He
him
worked
a
for
couple
Deep
times.
for 30 some odd years,
Yeah.
retired, and yeah.
All right, that's all I really had. Anybody else?
So guess the big number would be the net
Right.
ordinary income. So we're showing it as an unaudited number of 517,973. If the auditors come back and say that's good or that's close, that's the money that will go back to the town and go back into the undesignated fund.
Now, obviously, that's a good thing that we're, in the red, the black. It seems like a pretty big number.
It does, but we had that $130,000 windfall we didn't expect. We get saved money in snow plowing, which we never know. We had 3 empty offices in town hall during the course of the year, which saved money. So it's very explainable. I'd be more worried if we couldn't explain it and we just over budgeted and then people think we're over budgeting. But I don't see that. Because if you look at most of the lines are pretty close to where we budgeted, but everything has a big deviation, there's an answer for it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
And I only had one question on the present P and L from July through October 2024. And that's the steep grant revenue at A317. Is that unrelated to the steep money that we,
I don't have that. How much was that?
776,525?
So I think that's the combination of both steep grants, but we have not received any of that money in yet. I think you've got the first report that went out, that we should put that on incorrectly.
Oh,
And then the second one that came out was amended, and that was off.
okay. No questions then.
I got one.
Go ahead.
For B 20.01 volunteer fire company insurance, that's already over.
I had that question.
We talking about for October?
Yeah, going to October.
Okay, I can't answer that yet, Dan, because I haven't reviewed the current P and L
Yeah,
yet.
I just don't know if it's because they have more people that they have to cover, or did something change, or,
How much is it over? Because I don't have it with me.
25, yeah, about 2,500.
$2,500. But
Yeah.
that's a one-time only payment. They won't be getting any more payments on that. So what'll happen is at the end of the year, it'll still be that same number.
Yeah, so they're still over by 2,550.
And what was the budgeted number?
39,000.
Okay, it's something that Suzanne and myself can look into, but I have not looked at the current year
That
yet.
that was one of the only things that I saw that kind of popped out, except for contractual services.
So I typically do and I'll review that probably next week when it's slow with town. I take the selectmen's pay because we pay weekly. Whatever that percentage is, anything that's over above will set off an alarm, like why are we so low? But we do pay a lot of things, 100% of it paid right up front, like insurances.
Yeah.
The bigger people like the fire company, the ambulance, and the wheel library, we pay them 50% in January and 50% in July. So
Yeah.
that's how that works.
Because if we're already over, if we're already over that much.
On the insurance you're
On
talking
the
about.
insurance.
And I think I'll find out what that reason
There's
is.
gotta be a reason behind that.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
But the good news is it's not going to continue to get more. It's a one-shot
It's a
deal. So,
one-shot deal.
so
No.
once we get the answer, we'll know what it is for the year.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just, I know it's probably, you had quite a backlog of bookkeeping to catch up on. Was there anything concerning or surprising as she worked through it all, or did everything?
No, I think coming from non-municipal background, but having a great accounting background is just the learning process of how funding happens in a municipality. I will say that Melissa is very big on security, which is a good thing. When you go into her office, you have to turn everything upside down. She turned her desk around so no one could walk behind it. And I think it's from where she worked before. So she keeps everything tight to the vest when it comes to personnel and things like that, which is good, because we might have been maybe a little bit too not as secure with that stuff. But no, she's doing a wonderful job, and it's amazing that she's caught on so quickly, actually.
Okay, just since this is a public meeting, for clarity, I wasn't asking about her performance.
Yeah, but you're asking.
I was
if
just
we-
asking, as she was working through the backlog, did she catch anything that she was concerned about, or did everything seem like payables, receivables, everything seemed to catch up just fine?
As far as the numbers, yes. Again, it was just a question she had on, what's this?
Okay.
Like how do grants work and that kind of thing. But no, as far as there was nothing that jumped out at us, oh my God, this looks like a big mistake you guys made, and I'm glad we caught it, but we haven't had that.
Okay.
Thank God.
That's okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Bob. On to agenda item number 5, review Board of Education financials. And we did receive the business manager's monthly report dated December 11th, 2024, that went out to everybody. And if you didn't get it, you didn't confirm with me that you didn't get it.
I have my copy if anybody needs a paper copy.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that you're going to note when you look at this is that it's not typical of the format that you get from us. Usually you get September, October, November. And after last month, we had asked Kathy Trammell to give us a year-end projection. So that's what you're seeing in this report. That's why it looks a little different.
In the monthly report she gave kind of would summarize the, you know, what she puts in the comment sections to a
The-
degree.
The comment section, I think, was largely meant for our discussion at the meeting last week. Obviously, some of the larger concerns, she wanted to provide some notes for discussion.
So according to the report, 112 of that shortfall for salaries. Um,
Do
Some
you
of
have
it's
the
gonna be,
narrative summary,
yeah,
Gary?
Thanks. I think I have that. Okay, we're good.
special education short 112. But looks like almost, I guess, on less 13,000 is gonna be covered by Preston and Volantown. Is that what you're anticipating?
So that's the hope. As you all are aware, we collect tuition money and that tuition money goes directly to the town. Included in that tuition money are overages that those towns have to pay for any students that receive special education. That money also goes to the town. And then my understanding is that the process should be that the town then provides us back that overage. And so that's what that anticipated money is.
Okay. And you guys have a process, working on a process for that?
In all candor, no, it was discovered that that maybe hasn't been happening, and it wasn't something that happened the first year that we had tuition-based students. So the first year we had students that didn't have any special education needs, and then as the program grew, as you know, we're in our fourth year now. As the program grew, that changed a bit, and it was something that wasn't necessarily caught by our central office. And I'm not sure that the town would have any sense of whether there was special education money wrapped in there. I don't believe that their checks are itemized in that way. So there have been discussions, I think as recently as yesterday, between Bob and Troy to sort of determine what the process for that should be.
Okay.
What is what teachers RBT salary bonus?
So if you remember, we were hiring for some new positions, and they were called RBTs, and the RBTs were paraprofessionals who were given some additional training to deal with some more significant behavioral issues. And then they were going to be given an additional stipend if a paraprofessional had received that training and was in that role. So the word bonus shouldn't be used. It was their stipend after they went through their RBT training and were in that role. When we started digging down in the Board of Ed meeting, we realized that some of those notes aren't terribly accurate. If you recall from the budget, we budgeted for 3 RBTs.
Yeah, we did. That's what I was
Mhm.
going to say.
And
We,
here it says 4 RBTs. So that's not actually where that comes from. So perhaps that accounts for $8,000, but not all of it. I don't know how many people have watched the Board of Ed meeting, but we spent a great deal of time prior to the board meeting and then at the finance committee meeting, really digging in line by line, and then realized that the problem really is that maybe this budget wasn't as accurate as we all believed, and that we could spend weeks going through every line item to determine what went wrong here. And so we began to focus as a board on solutions moving forward. What's going to be our process? How are we going to get through this? And really charging Kathy and Troy to do that digging to provide us with the answers. I mean, Christine Wagner sat down and was comparing budget year after year to try and figure this out for herself. And that maybe is not where our time should be spent right now, but more asking the people that we've charged with that to do that, to bring us some solutions, and then for the board to put in some solutions in terms of process. So for example, we're a little concerned about what this means for us, not only for the end of this year, but also for budgeting for next year. And so one of the things that we've decided to do until we can get more stable reporting is to freeze any spending out of the non-lapsing account until we get 2 months of stable reports. We want to make sure that we preserve that money if we need to use it in an emergency to cover things that perhaps we haven't anticipated. The longer that Kathy is here, I believe the more accurate these numbers are getting. And while they look a little scary with all that red, I think it's necessary. We've got to figure it out. She's doing a great job. And I think that we'll start to see some stability in those projections. And once that happens, I think we'll have a better plan, not only for the non-lapsing account, but for how we'll finish out the year. Troy did send an email to all staff asking them to be mindful of some spending, color copies. You'll notice we're way over in the copy printing line, that sort of stuff. So they're making some adjustments on their end. Kathy's sort of unraveling this one as she's working to begin to build next year's. So I don't know that I have the very best explanation for all of these because I'm not sure that we have the very best explanation for all of them yet. But I'm confident that they'll be forthcoming.
So I have a question concerning the second bullet. Basically, we went over due to hiring of additional coaches, last minute hires costing more than anticipated, and summer school costs. Summer school costs, but the additional coaches and last minute hires costing more than anticipated. How did we get to that?
Good question. We spent a bit of time on that at our meeting. What I understand is that initially we had hired someone for the alternative ed program who was a new teacher at a relatively low step. A position opened up across the street, a special ed position, and he moved over into that position. And then we hired for the alternative ed position, and the teacher that we hired for that was at a significantly higher step. We met as a board because we have to approve any hires over at, I think it's step 8. And we were informed that the budget, that our salary budget could in fact handle that. I believe that maybe wasn't accurate and it couldn't. Additionally, Troy has created a lead teacher position at the elementary school and attached a stipend to that, again, believing that it would be able to be absorbed into that line. It was not. Our indoor track team had a pretty significant enrollment this year. They went, I think we're at 31 kids. And so we also utilized one of those stipends for an assistant track coach, as it didn't seem appropriate to have one coach managing 31 students.
thank you for that.
Anytime. I think that that's everything And then summer school, and the teachers recommended more kids than.
It's just, if we know that this budget, and we've kind of had this feeling that this budget wasn't gonna be that great, because I watched the Board of Ed meetings, and it seems as the weeks go on and the meetings go on and on and on, we see more red, we see more red. We keep on hearing the inaccuracies with, the utilities. We're going on 2 or 3 years now with issues with that. Hiring, moving people around, yes, you froze the undesignated fund, but it's kind of like, all right, well, great, but you had all these other issues that we've known about, but you can't absorb into your budget what you don't know is accurate. And it seems like this, even these forecasted numbers, I throw some shade on it because I'm like, are these really good numbers? We talk about, hey, we're a delta of positive 46,000. Can I legitimately think that it's a true 46,000, or is it we're getting to that number? It's 46,000. Are we below it? How accurate is that number?
Well, I think that if you consider that we are in the middle of December of a budget that will go through June 30, I don't think anyone could tell you right now what that number looks like. I think that I am gaining more and more confidence in Kathy's predictions. But you're right, we've seen them change. I was here the last time we talked about financials, and I talked to you about my two concerns, repairs and maintenance line and the electricity line. When you look at these projections, it looks vastly different than what I came to talk to you about a few months ago. And so I think you're right, Dan, that we don't know what we don't know. And unfortunately, things have, and a lot of it due to Kathy's deep diving, a lot of things have surfaced. And I'm hoping and I'm optimistic that we're coming to the end of that. But
Because
we'll see if these stay stable or not.
because my biggest worry is we're gonna be sitting here, during the budget season and everything. You guys are gonna come with us to this big number, and it's gonna be like, well, we got to this number because our numbers weren't great last year and everything, and it's gonna be like, hey, crazy number. I get a feeling that's deep down inside me, and it's gonna be like, well, whose fault is that?
Yeah, I think the board shares your concern.
Go ahead, Amy.
Well, Steph, thank you for being here. I have a couple of questions.
I'll try my best.
Yep. What was the increase for the Learn?
So if you look at line 4, salary central office,
Mhm.
and you see it's in the positive 32,000. So Greg Pont, who was our IT director, retired. And so that's the balance after we met all of our obligations to him. That's the balance of his salary. That's the overage. So in an effort to continue to run our IT program, but at the same time assess whether or not we need an IT director, did we have the right sort of setup for that, or do we want to try something else? So then if you skip down and you see Learn Technology Services, and that's in the red 38,000, that's Learn projected out through the end of the year, subbing in for Greg Pont when needed. So those lines sort of cancel each other out. We're also using Learn for some services in central office to help Kathy as she was working through some of the stuff. She just needed a little extra manpower in there. That's what that line is.
What is Learn? Refresh my memory.
I wish I could tell you the acronym. I
Just give
can't.
me the high
It's sort,
level.
I liken it to like the COG
Cog for Board
for
of Ed?
education.
Okay.
Yeah,
For
so they have
overall
lots,
education.
Okay.
they have
Kinda
lots of
contract out.
really incredible services, and they've been really helpful with IT. And if this is the model we continue with, it would put our IT director sort of budget, we'd be in a significant savings. This year it will be a wash.
On the non-lapsing account. So you went ahead and you did freeze the spending on the unlapsing account. I just wasn't clear, was that on money that has Like, all, so is it the whole 193,000 or is it just the money that has not been already approved?
It's the money that hasn't been approved.
Okay.
We just wanted to make sure that someone went through all of those approvals as well, made sure that everything in that report was accurate.
Mhm.
And
And
we just
then-
made sure we just hung out a little bit until we get a sense of what this year's budget or next year's budget might be. looking like.
Another thing is just what always concerns me about this budget, or if I see a budget that ends in a lot of zeros, to me, those are estimates and not real numbers.
They're absolutely estimates.
So, and I understand like what you're projecting here, but you know, when you look at the non-lapsing account, you can tell that those are real expenditures and numbers. So, I don't know, maybe just, it would seem a little more concrete going forward if we really did have that dollar in, dollar out amount.
On your monthly report?
Really, it should be on any report.
Sure. So this report, you're not going to see that because this isn't a monthly report.
Mhm.
We had asked her not to bother with a monthly report for us and instead do this projection.
Forecast.
What did we budget? Where are we at now? And what does she forecast us being at the end of the year? So, I mean, it certainly is a large estimate.
Thank you.
If just need some clarification here back to teachers' assistant salaries. As I'm looking at this, you're gonna be under budget by 102,000 right now, but that's a projection. But if I read this, the notes correctly, it says that you're over budget 3 people, 3 full-time equivalents. Plus, you've got the salary bonus.
I'm seeing it the other way, and I don't know whether it's a
Well, that-
nomenclature.
well,
Yeah, they're using the sign convention backwards from
That's
business.
exactly right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, this is not,
Right.
the way this is presented doesn't help.
Yeah, so let's go, rather
but-
than ask them to redo their sign convention, let's you and I adapt their sign convention.
I am. got
Good,
it,
thanks.
Because they're saying their full year budget's 528. And so is that the result of just hiring these people?
I don't think that the notes are terribly accurate based on the conversation that we had in our meeting. And so I'm hopeful that the next time we get projection from Kathy, so we meet next in January, but I don't anticipate we'll have our finance meeting till the end, that we'll have a better understanding of the why.
I'm
How
reading
about-
that particular line, just so you and I are on the same page as,
Yeah.
their budget's 528.
They're over budget.
They're forecasting 631.
So they're over budget.
They're a bad guy.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's being portrayed as in a positive way, which it shouldn't be.
if you look at the electronic version, it's red, which is what I'm keying in on.
Red,
That helps.
we can
But
print.
I
the
would
code.
ask this question. Compared to last year's budget, how many more full-time equivalents have you hired? Beyond the budget that was approved, how many additional staff was hired?
So my understanding is that when IEPs were done with kids, there were some needs identified and that necessitated the hiring of 3 additional paraprofessionals that we hadn't budgeted for.
Not just, okay, I'm talking about in total, because I've heard about some other people being hired here that weren't in the budget. Unless I misheard. unless
So I don't think anyone was hired that wasn't in the budget. Certainly, there's been a lot of shifting, but that's normal. That happens all the time. Someone resigns, someone retires. We fill that position, people move around. What was created was an additional lead teacher position at the elementary school. So that's not a person. That's a stipend for someone to be in that role.
If I recall from the budget from last year, we needed the person that, one additional person hired in special education that was going to oversee that whole program that was going to oversee the FTEs and I thought that was the RBT position.
That's the BC name.
Right.
acronym.
There was,
But yes,
that was in the budget.
That's the hill
Yeah.
that Troy was gonna die on.
Yes.
Sounds like he's dying.
No,
Yeah.
that was not that.
That was not
a
that.
social-
That was the additional social worker,
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Right. But this was another kind of
Yes.
in a social work position.
They were overseeing the RBTs.
Right. Then the paras were going to be trained to be able to handle additional situations, and they were going to be bumped up in salary. And you did determine that there was actually 3 more of those RBTs that, or FTEs that had to be hired.
No, 3 more paras,
Oh.
not 3 more RBTs.
Okay, so,
So it certainly contributed, but I'm not sure in totality what went wrong there. I do not believe that we were creating additional positions outside of those 3 paras that we have to hire if the IEP says that those kids need one-to-one.
okay.
And you said that lead teacher is a stipend position.
That's my understanding. The first time that we were informed about that was
Okay.
last week's discussion.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go ahead. No. Go ahead. You sure? You sure? Okay. I have 2 things. If I remember right, you guys took $35,000 out for the Cub Club as seed money to get that going. How is that going? And are you anticipating that's going to get paid back by either the end of the year? Are you guys on track with that?
So that was the non-lapsing,
No, yep.
in my understanding, although I don't believe it's reflected in this current report, so perhaps hasn't been used yet. The Cub Club is self-sustaining, and it just sort of sits there, ready to be used if we need it.
Okay.
She's done a great job at not only running it, she got a couple of grants. They're utilizing the education pathway at the high school to get some kids in there to assist. It's been
Awesome.
very successful.
And then I'm sure, because like I said, I watch your videos and everything. The servers, where the servers fall into this?
The switches,
The switches, servers, switches, whatever people are calling them. But where do they fall into this?
they don't. You
You
don't
don't.
see them there.
You don't see them there.
No.
They don't come out of the undesignated fund because you guys didn't vote on them.
That's right. So my understanding after last week's meeting, which is not reflected here in this report, is that those switches will have to be purchased out of the general operating budget.
And it's been committed under the emergency spending authorization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it was identified as an emergency and it was handled as such.
Yeah,
So-
it was committed. I mean, it's committed. We got a $45,000 bogey we got to find a
I
home
think
for.
36.
Okay.
Okay, 36, but I see a lot of red, so it'd be interesting to see what line item that is gonna come out of to be
Agreed.
able to support that purchase.
Again, in candor to the board, also not reflected in this report is the $56,000 IRS bill.
Okay.
And so you're not going to see that here. I imagine you will see that moving forward. And if you listen to our meeting, you would probably understand what happened as well as I understand it. And that's that dating back to 2020, there was an $11,000 bill. Because it was COVID, they weren't sending them out. And for whatever reason, the school was unaware. And then what would happen is that we might overpay in a quarter, thinking that that overpayment would be applied to the next quarter. But the IRS was applying it to this balance that nobody knew that we had. So this whole time, we've been accruing fees and penalties. So there was a very quick, once Kathy figured it out, got on the phone with them and they said, this is what it is. There was a quick decision, and I think rightfully so, because the interest changes daily, to pay that immediately. That was paid out of the operating fund. And Kathy is working with the IRS now to see if they can work backwards. So explaining that while we understand that there was a problem, perhaps there's something that they could do to give us some of that money back. It was during COVID. They weren't letting us know. It didn't seem very clear. And so I'm hopeful that she'll find a way to recoup some of that money, but that bill had to be paid, and so it was.
And that's not coming out of the undesignated fund. for you
No, it
guys.
is not.
It's coming out of some, so you guys at some point are gonna have to encumber that money out of some line item.
That's right.
I don't even think the non-lapsing account could be used for that.
So segueing to non-lapsing, what was last year's contribution of non-lapsing from a,
So because the audit hasn't happened,
yep. just
I
rough
don't
numbers,
know,
rough
but I
numbers.
could tell you that now I think we're going to be down to 8,000.
No, last year.
Oh,
At the end of last year's
I think
budget
it's at
year.
the top of that non-lapsing group. I think it was like 46,000, Gary.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how much of the non-lapsing commitments that have been made? So nice job stopping any further non-lapsing till you get your arms. First of all, I want to start with Kathy's doing a great job.
Mhm.
If she's listening, she should not take this as a criticism. I think she's got an incredibly hard job uncovering all this and daylighting it. So
Thank you,
thank
Kathy.
you for
I
that.
appreciate that.
Kathy.
too.
But, and kudos to the Board of Education for stopping additional spending on the non-lapsing, but I believe perhaps it's time to take the next step also and say, how much of the commitments can be stopped and recouped rather than just say, because we approved and we're going to spend them? Because it's going to get that tight on this. And
Yeah.
then the third question I have is, in a year like this year, where it looks like potentially the Board of Education could exceed their budget, how does that work for next year's budget? Does the variance get baked in, therefore we can't reduce last year's
Mhm.
budget plus the variance? Or
Yeah.
is it the budget?
It's the budget.
So it should be the budget, not what past actuals, it's the budget.
From my understanding from past history, it is the budget.
Okay. So there, you answered the question. Thank you for the last year's non-lapsing. One takeaway, perhaps we look to stop what we're spending now on things that are in flight. But I would like to know what's the Board of Education's thoughts on bridging the gap? Now, I understand it's all fresh news. We don't know what the gap is, but those who plan to fail, fail to plan.
I think if we start with,
Blah,
Carl,
blah.
can I borrow your
Yeah,
report for a
sure.
second? If we
Yeah.
start with the non-lapsing stuff, so when you look in here, really the biggest chunk is going to be that committed money that we have is the $46,000 for our field irrigation. And that's that 20% of the steep grant. And then the Cub Club, $35,000. I don't anticipate that $35,000 are going to be spent. We just wanted to put that aside for the Cub Club. And then that $12,000 storage container just may not be an issue for us anymore. So we don't have, it's $93,000 of unspent approved funds. We don't have any plan to stop with the irrigation project. I think that we're getting, 80% of the project done via grant. We wouldn't want to have to pay that 100%. And then, like I said, I don't anticipate expending that $35,000 in Cub Club. That's sort of a fund in case she needs it. And then I don't know that we're going to need that $12,000. So
My question on this, the budget for the irrigation, right? How confident do you guys feel in that number for a guaranteed project? Shovel in the ground, we start digging, with contingency and everything else is gonna go on. Is there any potential risk that you guys could go over on?
I mean, I think there's always a risk, but the RFPs I think are scheduled to go out or were posted, but that'll happen, I think, this week. So I think we'll have a better sense
Okay,
when those RFPs come out.
thank you.
And Gary, I guess to really answer your question, we haven't had that conversation. Based on our last board meeting, I don't think we're ready to say, hey, we're going to pull back on approved things. I think we feel pretty confident about it. Putting the brakes on was really about, let's make sure everything we're looking at is accurate. I had received an invoice. I have to sign off on invoices from the non-lapsing account before the town will pay them. I was given one to sign. I couldn't find the approval. Troy and Irma dug back. It was in our non-lapsing account, but the board had never approved it. And so we were asking, let's go through, let's check for accuracies. Let's make sure that we're looking at the real thing, and then we can revisit it.
So can we request that you not award the RFP till we have a better understanding as to where we are?
I don't think the board's looking to do that right now, but I
No,
think
no,
we're
no, no,
far
no,
out.
no. I'm asking, can the
Oh.
Board of Finance ask that the Board of Education not? I mean, you issue the RFP, you get the feedback from the market, but let's not execute a contract till we know where we are.
You're talking about the steep grant?
Yep.
Well, that would be kind of tricky, I think, especially with it's already been, basically the steep grant's already been awarded, correct? So
Yes.
I mean, we don't see the money for some time, but
we don't see the
yes.
money and everything, but we're in the detailed planning phase of that project.
If I were to think about, Gary, I
You
think
know
your
what I mean?
question was, can you guys say no to us? I think didn't we go to town meeting
Yeah.
on that steep grant and it was approved? So I'm not sure. And I don't know that that would be the wise thing to do. But
I think it would be important to know where the responses from the RFPs come in before we execute. First, the town approved the steep grant, and I agree with it, and I voted for it. That assumes we're within our budget. This is a game changer.
I'm hopeful that we'll be within our budget at the end.
I think Gary, I think those rules play along with like how we have the roof over on the 2-story and the air conditioning, where if it doesn't meet certain criteria of it, they don't execute the contract. Am I correct, Bob, on that?
So because it didn't come out right, I'm gonna rebid those to see if they come in closer. Because we're responsible for 20% plus of any overages. And the town could afford that at this point. So we'll see what the oil market does as far as that roof goes. We're gonna see where their grant came in. If they were under, I could use some of that money.
Mhm.
But, so we got awarded the money, but we don't have to take it. If we don't take it, don't do the job, but we saved the 20% that we would have spent. But then the job's not getting done.
You can second that.
Recognize Suzanne Thoreau, our administrator, Director of Administration and Finance.
Hi, just to recap on the steep grant. So right now for the irrigation project, we're ready to go out to bid. We're going to be posting the packet out on the websites and advertising it. So we're ready to move forward with that. And depending on what bidders come in, if they're qualified bidders, we'll determine if we accept any bids and move forward with the project.
And like we just talked about with the roofs and stuff like that, if the bids come in too high and we can't do it within budget, we're gonna have to wait till the market changes and rebid it, correct?
Right. Yeah. We'll have to see what the market is. And when we put that back out in the spring, and the last time, like Bob said, there wasn't just the bids weren't there. So we'll have to move forward with that part too.
Yep, okay.
So I think perhaps we need to just check we're speaking about the same datum. When you say within budget of the overall Board of Education budget, or within budget of what we projected the project was going to cost?
The project.
Project, what it's gonna cost.
Sorry, respectfully, I disagree. Because if we're over budget in operating an entity, and this is a subset of that entity, we might need to look at that. So we shouldn't just move forward because it comes in with what was discussed as the budget for the project. It should be, where are we as a financial entity, and are we going to be able to be in the black or the red at the end of the year?
And I don't disagree with you, Gary, but it's a question of, they have this non-lapsing account I do not believe would be able to be used to plug budgetary holes. So whether they use funds that have already been obligated and voted for from the RISA account to be used for a project really has nothing to do with whether or not they're over budget on their operating budget. That's going to have to be a completely different conversation. And I don't disagree with you that maybe we don't do projects when we're asking the town for an appropriation at the end of the day. And I see where you're going with that, and I agree with you. The question is though, you're talking about 2 pots of money and an opportunity to have 80% of a project that we desperately need over there covered by the state out of an account that has.
That's a fair statement, but I was not aware that the non-lapsing couldn't be used to plug budget gaps. Why is it considered part of the school budget? Because when we talked about reductions, that had to be lumped into it. So it's got to cut both ways, Mike.
It's, what I'm saying is that you can not put things into the operating budget using the RISA account,
Mhm.
meaning we are not going to ask for, this field to be done or this area to be paved or this playground to be put in because we're going to use this. And then it's not in the budget. I just don't think retroactively you can go back and use that money, even though it's for education purposes. You can?
So,
No.
Should be important that that's on.
how's that? Better, yeah.
Better.
One of the things that we can do and that we have done before is to back something out of the budget. So let's say it's an IT need. So we could move a line item out of the budget, pay for that through the non-lapsing account, and then free up that money. So those are, it's certainly not what we want to do. One of the great things about this budget is that we were funding every line item through the operating budget the way it should be. And so that would be a huge step backwards. But in the past, we've done things like professional development for teachers. We've done supplies, we've done technology. So we can certainly vote to move things around. It would not be ideal, but obviously, like you said, and Gary, you make total sense. I can't stand up here and say, Board of Finance, I'm looking for an appropriation, and then talk to you about this project that we're doing. So obviously bigger conversation, but I'm hoping again that things start to stabilize and we're in a better place next time to talk.
I think the only thing they can't really use that account for is general teacher salaries.
We can use it for that too. We just choose not to. It can be used for any educational expense that the Board of Education deems necessary. Our feeling is it doesn't make any sense to pay for a salary out of that because it's not a one-time purchase.
It's
Exactly.
a reoccurring thing, yeah.
Right, that needs to be built into the budget.
Yeah, these are for one-time things to benefit the student body.
We think that that's the best way to spend this money.
I just want to make sure I understand the report. So first of all, I'll echo what Gary said. I do very much like the narrative, sort of like the executive summary at the top. I'm really glad to see the forecast. I think that's fantastic. I don't know that we've ever done that before, so I think we've made a lot of great steps forward. So awesome. I'm just seeing, it's interesting. I see a lot of red lines, but they only add up to an overage of 200,000. Is that accurate? Is that what, am I interpreting that right?
It's not an overage, so we would be, according to the red, so we're under budgeted by, or we're going to go over our budget. Is that what are we saying the same thing? Yeah.
Sorry.
$203,000 before we receive the stuff on this sheet. So that's some title money, some grant money, and the Preston and Voluntown special ed money.
The net is okay. So you're saying you're going to, but you're going to receive somewhere around $200,000-ish. When are you going to receive it in this budget year?
Yeah. So do you have this sheet?
I'm looking at it. Yes.
So
I'm
those are the
adding
things that we,
150 plus 46. Is that right to add that or no?
no.
This is our bogey.
Yep.
These are all our good guys. That's our potential delta.
So what she's saying is at the
Okay,
end,
you
we
did
should
the
be,
math.
we should
Okay.
be in the
No, I
plus $46,000. And then additional title grants should come in and we should be looking at $106,000 in the black. But that doesn't take into account,
The two things we talked about, the
Right.
56K for the IRS and the
Right.
switches. Okay. Okay. So I do agree that moving, like how we move forward is more important than necessarily pointing to blame. And I think when you have a really competent person like Kathy, probably going to uncover some more things as we go along, which we don't ever want to like punish that, right? We want people to be able to
right?
put the daylight on it, as Gary called it. But I do think personally, right, if I were on, so I'd like to understand your plan, right? So I think as the Board of Ed, you need to feel confident that you can govern the budget. If you're not going to be in the details of reviewing it or not, of figuring out what went wrong, then I'm assuming you have a plan to review it. It would be really helpful for us as the Board of Finance to just set expectations, to have like targeted dates when you expect to be able to report on certain things. So I'm not asking for all these things at once. I'm saying like if you have a couple sessions and then you feel like you're going to be able to go line by line and figure out what went wrong, if you have other sessions that you plan, so when you figure out what's wrong, make a decision on whether or not you have to cut spending or not cut it. Like what Gary's kind of getting to and what a lot of people are asking is actually stuff that should be taking place like in steps down the line.
Sure.
So if there is a plan to get there, understanding that plan so we can kind of follow along on the journey and not be pressuring you for things that you're not ready to talk about yet, but knowing when they're coming will be
Yeah.
super helpful.
I want to back you up a bit. You talked about not placing the blame and moving forward, and that's a beautiful thing. But we all know in this process, it's not about placing blame, but when we move forward, we have to put processes in place that keep that from happening again. And so I don't want you to think what we're saying is, oh, this is super bad, but like it's a new day and we're moving. That is not what I'm saying. And I don't believe that that echoes what the board thinks either. So I think that what happened was when we started diving into this stuff and these narratives, and especially when Christine took out the budget and she's going through, these explanations didn't make a lot of sense. And so then we were like, okay, well, what about this? What about that? And it became clear that we employ people to do that. And so we then gave it back to Kathy and Troy and said, you go through, let's really figure it out. And then we'll sit down and we'll review everything that happened, why these are wrong, how they got there, and then what we're going to do moving forward. So it's not that we're just like, never mind, we're
I
talking.
didn't think
Yeah,
that,
we're
just
not
for the
gonna
record.
we're not gonna do the figuring, but we're gonna do the understanding, because we can't possibly have confidence in a budget next year if we don't understand what went wrong here. So that'll be the first step. I don't have dates for you. I know that we are moving into budget season and we're also moving back into a 2-meeting-a-month structure. We'll be doing our business meeting, so including our financials, at the second meeting of the month, because that gives Kathy the longest amount of time to consolidate and do everything she needs to with her December report for January reporting. So my understanding is that we are freezing this non-lapsing spending until we see stable reports in December, from December and January. So in February, I would think that we would have a better handle, not only on what happened, but then on did anything else get uncovered? Because like you said, things, when you're digging, we could be uncovering more things, and we do want the light of day on them. So I think in February, we'll have a better sense of all of this, and I'm happy to come back then. I'm happy to come back before then. We're going to have monthly reports for you. But I may not have everything that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think for me, it's, and I don't, the board can chime in on their opinions, but I would view this as its own sort of like mini project. We should look to resolve it as quickly as possible, right? And so understanding what the steps are to resolve that will help us have confidence that when the next time you give a report, it's gonna have, like, we're not gonna have, if we have unanswered questions, we know when we get to get them answered,
Sure.
right?
Right now, the steps to resolve it is that we've charged our business manager and our superintendent to unravel this and explain to us what happened.
That's step one. So what's 2, 3, 4, and 5?
So 2 would be to understand really what the projections are for the end of the year, because that has to be our first concern before we look to build a budget for next year. So what is the end of the year really projected to look like for us? And then we'll know whether or not we have a problem and we have to think about moving things out to the non-lapsing. We have to think about the possibility of an appropriation, all of that sort of stuff. And then we also have to look at, do we have a hole in our budget that we have to plug next year, which is really scary. I mean, you guys had to do with the budget. That was a really painful process, and I'm afraid of that, and I think the board echoes that. After that, once we get that taken care of, then we're working to build our budget. Troy and I spoke today. We meet weekly, and our weekly meetings now are going to include some other people. So Kathy's going to start meeting with Troy and I. I'm going to occasionally pull in Lisa Mazzella, the vice chair, Christine Wagner, the finance committee chair. And then we're also going to be pulling in other people. So these repairs, this repair line, concerning. We're going to pull Randy into some of those meetings so we can have some more detailed talks about. So New England Mechanical, we're way over with New England Mechanical. So are we just continuing to say, this is really expensive and we're blowing that line item? Or are we working on who else can serve in place of New England Mechanical? What are other districts doing? Who is Randy talking to? What we need to start solving the problem and not just acknowledging the problem. We want to make sure that that work's being done as we build the budget for next year. So other than that, you know, this happened at our last board meeting and we haven't had another board meeting since then. So this happened last Wednesday. So we will keep reporting to you. I will keep you up to date. Happy to forward any questions that you have to Kathy. And as our board makes decisions, obviously they're public meetings, but I'm happy to come in here and talk to you all about them too.
Thank you.
That was a very good synopsis right there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Having listened to the last board meeting, I would think your words are used up for a while. That was a marathon.
Sure was.
I mean, I'd like just to sum it up that, you know, we all know that from last year at this point to where we are right now, we had some bumps in the road with personnel that thankfully with good people doing a lot of hard work, we are on the road to recovery. And thank you to all the boards for your hard work and all the staff in the central office and town hall for all their hard work. And hopefully, because we need to be confident in this next budget season to keep going through these seasons as we have, relatively smooth processes and getting budgets passed that the people can have confidence in.
Agreed.
But going forward with something like this and how epically bad this is, we need to hold people accountable to the numbers that we're going to receive on both budgets. You know, we cannot, we're only as good as the information provided to us as an oversight board. So when we get the budgets and it's approved by your boards, does your budget now, since you have that subcommittee for does your budget go through that subcommittee and then kind of bubble up?
It will, and it has in the past. I mean, the concept of the finance committee isn't new. It's something that we sort of ebb and flow with it. Sometimes we like the idea, sometimes we don't. Right now we like it and we have one, and sure, a lot of those conversations will happen in the finance committee meetings.
Yeah, it's just that for us as a board, we just have to have, going forward, have extreme confidence in the numbers that are being presented to us.
And I feel like our board is saying the same thing.
Yep.
Because I do think there's a difference between controllable and uncontrollable. We're the beneficiary of seeing our insurance be significantly lower than what it would budget for. Absent that, we'd be about $500,000. And we had no input on that. So I don't think we're looking at a $200,000 problem. We really have to understand we're looking at a $500,000 problem. And
We do have significant things coming up with this next budget. So our insurance savings is a combination of rates and of changing staff. So a staff member retires that took a family plan, we hire a single person who's potentially selling their parents' insurance. Those things all change, right? And it's changing in the direction of it being more expensive for us. Additionally, we have a bus contract that will likely increase because we have to bid it out and renegotiate that. And then that $100,000 that we added into the budget and then had to back out as a mistake in the salary line, that does happen this year. So there are certainly concerns that this is a bigger problem than these numbers tell us for this year. We're looking at a struggle next year.
How often does the Board of Ed look at the Board of Ed finances? Monthly?
Every month.
So when did we go from to every line item is red?
So if you remember the last time I came here to go over, that was the first, oh, wow, we certainly have some problems. We have some problems in that electricity line and we have some problems in our maintenance and repair line, right? Two big problems, but seemed fine based on the calculations. That's when we had asked Kathy to go back and start giving us a forecast. And as she dug deeper and deeper and deeper, this is what she found.
So representing the Board of Finance and getting back on my soapbox that I was on a couple months ago, I'm hopping to the top again. I think we really need to hold the boards accountable to providing us with monthly financial reports that's required in our, I don't know, mandate or whatever. So I would suggest that this is a very good wake-up call for both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen to provide us and for us to require those reports.
My understanding, Winona, is that you have not received a financial report for the last 2 years. We send our reports every month.
Well, we know that that wasn't the case, remember, because we didn't have one for a full, like, for months and months.
No, not from us.
Yeah, and we rectified it.
We could
rectified it,
go
but-
back and look, but it's part of our meeting that we move them, whether or not you weren't receiving them. Understood. But we rectified that.
I'm not making this part up, Steph. I
But we
promise.
rectified that. Okay.
No, I am
Okay.
we're getting monthly reports
you're
from
getting the
Troy at
monthly.
this point.
Like this, not like this. the
This is-
first-
this is a different
a
format.
novel approach. This is the first time we've seen something like this.
No, we did get it last time, same
Last
time.
month was like that.
We haven't, this is the first time we've gone through it like this.
Yeah, Kathy came.
Yeah, that's when she came.
Kathy
So-
came here last month and
Yeah.
explained what this all was about and everything, and then this is the second month we received that.
Right.
So this is a stretch goal, and I'm not trying to throw a drowning woman a rock. But
Thanks.
I'm talking to Kathy, through you. In the future, I don't know about you, Lou, but I'd like to see budget, committed, year-to-date spend, and forecast. Those 4 items, because that gives you the details as to where we actually are.
Well, the
What are you
committed
missing
should
there?
be Part of
Committed?
the forecast.
Yeah,
Right?
but.
I mean, that's part of how you build your
What I'm trying to
forecast.
figure out, how much is committed and how much is windage? So if I knew what we actually committed against the budget, it's a $60,000 budget, we committed 75, and we think we're gonna spend 150 by year end. That's a very different picture than, I got a $75,000 budget and I think I'm gonna spend 150, but I don't know what I'm gonna spend it on. That's what I'm looking at. It's a nuance, but she's doing a great job.
Yeah.
This is, like I said, stretch goal.
Good. I don't want to overwhelm her right now.
Mhm.
I'd like to retain our good employee.
And I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I'm looking back through emails, and if I'm receiving all of the emails that the rest of this board is, we do not have monthly financial reports from the Board of Ed.
Well, that's part of it was, I would send you the email from Troy and you guys weren't getting them. So we're trying to rectify that by, Bob is sending you his reports to the whole Board of Finance. If I get something from Troy and you guys are not on that, I have to open up the document itself and send it to you separately. I can't just forward you an email, which we found out.
Would you prefer Troy just to send to the entire Board of Finance instead of just to you?
Yep.
You can handle it. I didn't realize.
It's
that
easy
that-
to just
got
BOS,
more
we have one thing, it puts in one thing and it goes to all of us. Microsoft Outlook just was not, I thought I was sending it to you guys every time and it wasn't coming
I want to
through.
go back to one of the questions. I forget who asked it, but when we get to the end of this cycle and we are looking at the budget for 25, 26, how does where we end 24, 25 impact that again? I want to hear that again, because I'm not sure that that made sense to me.
Gary was saying if the budget for last year was $15 million. And they spent $16 million. The new budget's $16 million, not. You're starting from where you.
I wasn't saying that, I was
we-
asking that.
Because I believe if you went over that much and everything, you have to have the money appropriated for somewhere out of the undesignated fund of the town or wherever, so it would be a part of the budget. If I'm remembering correctly, to the one time this actually did happen.
So just expanding your example. The budget was 15. They spent 16, say. Do we start at 15 or do we start at 16?
You start at 16.
I'm hearing
We s-
16.
We start at 16.
So the
Yes.
spend becomes the floor.
What you guys gotta realize.
You got, you certainly, if you're Troy and Kathy, who really, because last year it was Troy and Bill. And if you recall, there was a budget used that included a step increase in a year that didn't include a step increase,
Correct.
which gave us a lot smaller budget in the end, which Troy caught afterwards. And I imagine there are other things that are in that budget that went forward that probably got us in this predicament, that have to be really looked at, because if you spent 16 and you budgeted 15, something was amiss, and then, so your budget has to be
Can we get some
closer.
guidance, some official guidance on this from
Yeah.
Suzanne or somebody? Because like unrepeatable favorability, unrepeatable unfavorability should not be baked into the budget. If we get a bogey like an IRS late payment that we come to and pay, that's not something that should be baked into the budget as a recurring.
Obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
those one-time items, but you're talking about an ongoing expense like salary and everything like that, that's not correct.
Ye-
Then you have to really look at that. Those one-time expenditures that,
The-
were an anomaly, I agree with you.
I believe the Board of Ed budget can be cut. However, it's not the Board of Finance. We can't say, hey, you need to go below last year's levels of this X. We can't go below that. They have to go do that.
But I think what they're asking is, can't go below last year's budget. But last year's budget was over by $1 million. Does it start at that extra million?
Yeah, because that's what's
So-
voted on.
So
think we
every
need-
time the budget goes over by $10,
Yeah.
you start at $510 the next year, whether it was there or not. Am
And
I
then
correct?
Yeah. and
I
next
I
year.
don't,
I
I think we
don't
need
agree with that.
clarification on that.
There's a
because
statute
Yeah.
that talks
But
about
I
Board of
think-
Ed budget, but we could maybe pull it and see what it says
Well,
about that
what-
overage.
who's ever the appropriate
Mhm.
town representative to look at that, because it's a legal issue. And if the statute says whatever money they spend, they just keep spending, or is it based on the approved budget? That's a huge difference. And somebody's got to tell us, this is the law and this is what we need to abide by. Because I can't
Isn't it
believe
like
you would just be able to
15% or something
continue
like
to
that?
spend and not have a constraint on that.
When I find it, I'll send it to
I
you all
mean,
as well so that you can read it.
Well, they can't overspend their budget without coming to us for an appropriation. They have the money that they got in the undesignated fund, the RISA account, and what they have for an approved budget. They can't just start pulling money out of thin air. They have to get the money from somewhere, and it has to be approved. Right? Pretty correct on that one, unless you guys have another account that we don't know
We
about.
don't have any secret accounts.
No secret accounts, but I think that's where we're kind of going with this. It's like, where's
So-
that money gonna come from? It's one of a couple of places.
So when do they ask for the 203?
So the good news is
Well, not
We're-
more than that.
we're talking about something that could happen, but you'll see that 203 is mitigated by
The other
those
money.
funds that are supposed to come in.
That is supposed to come in,
Right,
but this is a calendar year. I'm sorry, fiscal year.
yes.
So if they don't come in during the fiscal year as planned,
Sure.
then we would have to make up the difference,
Or,
plus the 56 to the IRS.
or what might happen is that it shifts again. Someone leaves, we hire someone at a smaller salary. So there's lots of things that can happen between December and June to impact that bottom line.
Yeah.
Both ways.
A
Yeah.
1000%
mean,
both
so-
ways.
I mean,
Aren't we
so-
experiencing that right now?
So.
For sure.
yeah,
So
Okay.
we will, I think it's early to panic. We should plan and we'll keep talking, and I'm happy to come every month. I mean, this is a thing. So happy to be here every month and we can go over them, and that will, Winona, ensure that you're actually getting them. We'll have Troy send directly to all of your emails.
I think Lou, that's why I wanted a plan, because like we need to say, like, there's got to be a line that gets snapped to say, like, if we're in March or what, I don't know what the right answer is, but like, we're going to do this for this amount of time. We're going to do the next step for this amount of time. And if in March, we're still 200,000 over, then we're going to talk about cost cutting, or we're going to talk about an appropriation. Like we have to snap a line somewhere.
And respectfully, I think we're the ones that have to snap it in terms of our operating budget. So once we have an operating budget, it's Troy's to administrate, and he has some guardrails in terms of his administration of that. But we together as a Board of Ed will have to make a decision. And I apologize, we just couldn't get there the other night, and I can't give you a plan. I can't give you any more than I have, because I don't want to represent the board when the board doesn't have a plan. We'll at some point, and I agree, sooner rather than later, we'll have to say, hey, I think we're looking at an appropriation. And I think that's what I said to you last month when I said, if I'm thinking appropriation based on these problems that we have, I'll keep on you. I'll let you know. Sarah, I don't want you to think that we are going to tolerate loosey-goosey, well, this is a little bit of a problem. I don't think the Board of Ed's going to tolerate that, and I don't expect the Board of Finance to tolerate it. I would ask that you give us a little time to continue with our regular meetings to figure this out. As you guys know, you can't figure stuff out outside of your meeting, to allow our staff to do the work that we're paying them to do, to bring us some of their response and to work from there. So I'm asking for a little bit of patience until your January meeting, and I'll come back at your second January meeting and talk to you about where we're at.
I think you might want to
Oh,
consider, maybe temporarily, maybe permanently, having some sorts of checks and balances on that emergency authorization policy.
I think we do have it. I think it's written into the policy. I understand what you're saying.
I mean, that was a commitment made by one,
It was.
based on what I heard on the call, and that there should be no ability to commit without someone else agreeing.
I think that we'll continue to talk about the policies that we have put in place to protect the taxpayer of North Stonington.
I will thank you for coming here and listening to all our questions, but I think next meeting you need to bring Troy
Yeah.
and have him speak to this.
I'm going to suggest that you plan for the February 5th meeting. I don't know when you guys aren't presenting to us until in March, correct?
Really, Mark.
For the budget,
Yeah.
March.
So this is, we want the report through, half the year. We'll have the report for that. And you can tell us where you are with these issues. And I think we'd like to hear from Troy how, when he's doing the budget with Kathy, how are we going to do a little bit better this time around? What's his plan for going forward? And we'd like to hear it from him because he's building the budget for you guys to review.
Absolutely. And I think you'll hear it from him if you want to at our board meeting, because I think that we are expecting that as well.
Okay.
Well,
That's-
he's fixing, first he's got to fix this budget.
That's two parts.
Yeah, two parts.
Where are you with regard to
This one.
this one? How is he in the central office modifying their systems for building next year's budget? And we can do that at the February 5th meeting.
You don't want a January appearance by Troy and Kathy? You have the library presentation at that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. February it is. Do you want Kathy as well, right? Isn't that helpful?
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone who can answer the questions. You can let me know if you think you have something for us for the January 15th meeting.
I could also send an email. I mean, if you're getting the reports anyway, I could always, if there are significant updates, knowing especially what your concerns are, Sarah, specifically as they relate to the idea of a plan, I'm happy to send an email to you summarizing what's happened at our meeting, if there's something.
Okay. Yeah, you guys meet on the 8th.
We do,
You're
but
not-
that
you-
won't be
you're
our
not-
business meeting. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this, but we won't have,
You don't
a
have any other
December
meeting, you
report.
know, you have no other meetings this month, right?
no.
All right, I think we're done.
Well, I have a question. Back in October, I think it was, there was a meeting here where there was a change in Connecticut statute about the oversight of the non-lapsing account. How does any of that play into what we're talking about here and Gary's concern about putting the kibosh on new spending?
So I think if I'm right, the way the statute was written, you would have an opportunity prior to say something like, I'm shutting your non-lapsing account down. I don't think that statute afforded you any additional oversight of the spending out of that account. So it always has been that those expenditures are made for the educational purposes through the Board of Education. The only language that changed was your ability to control what happened to that account, whether we have one or not. So that was removed. And I don't want to leave without saying it is very clear to our board that while you don't have oversight of our non-lapsing account, that our operating budget and our non-lapsing account are tied together. We know that you know that we have that money, and we know that you're watching that money, that you have questions about how we spend that money or how we're not spending that money, and that we have to be accountable to you for that money, especially if we're talking about things like we need more money from you.
You're not on.
School board unilaterally ended that agreement between the
right.
finance board, and actually you did it without even discussing that with us. So that, there's better ways to handle things than that. I mean, that really was, in my mind, not a very good way of
I agree.
of
And after
stating
that
we're trying to
meeting,
work together here.
Yeah,
when you
for sure.
Do something like that.
throughout that meeting and after that meeting, I felt horribly about the way that happened. And I've made the idea of collaboration, not just with your board, with Bob's board, really high on my priority list, because I think it's the only way that we advance the town in a responsible way. And so that was my mistake in not understanding that you all weren't watching the same statutes that we were. So I was shocked that you were shocked that happened. I deeply apologize for that. That was something that was driven by me at my board meeting to like tie things up. I had no idea. And I understand that caused consternation. And I deeply apologize for that. It was not in any way meant to be underhanded or to try and sneak something by you. It was public information. We had been talking about it in our public meetings. And in moving forward, I would certainly reach out to Mike and Bob and I talk, Mike and I talk and say, hey, did you get this statute? I'm gonna ask the board to end this MOA, and we could have talked about it.
Okay. So,
We're gonna move on to the next agenda item. Savvy, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
guys. I appreciate your patience.
I think we can get through item number 6 quickly. Melissa did email me that the auditors are on schedule for January 14th through the 16th to be here to review the books. And I had a follow-up question of when do they think they'll present to us? And per the auditors, assuming no issues arise with the audits, typically 2 months after they complete the audit field work. So we'll look at the March of 2025.
So this is where it's gonna throw, I saw the look at it. This is where it's gonna throw us for a loop by delaying the audit. Because normally we have these numbers solidified. We get the report. We we get it in a hard copy and whenever, but they go over it to us. And we talk to Daryl. So we have this finalized number when we start developing this capital plan and actual budget. So we have something to shoot for as we start seeing this stuff go throughout. So if we're not getting it to middle of March, end of March, just say that, end of March. That's like right when we're start voting and starting to send stuff back, not getting a final number saying, hey, this is your final number. Normally we have that, what, in January, if I remember right,
We
Sarah?
do.
So,
I don't know that, I agree. I don't know if there's anything we can do about it at this point. right?
well.
I don't disagree with you, Dan. It's, what it's gonna do is, we have Melissa's numbers here. They're unaudited. There's a 517 give back that, is, to Bob's point, is explained in certain ways. Really all that it does is it determines what's in the undesignated fund. So it will be part of our budget decisions in the end. Because we might be over our 17% and want to do we probably will be over our 17% if we want to do something with regard to lowering mill rate if that's possible, or reducing debt. But, we couldn't manufacture personnel out of thin air to get us what we needed done last spring through the summer. And, I understand your point, but we are where we are.
I'm just saying, we'll go back to the tri-board meeting where it would, the decision, we pay for the auditing service and we didn't have a decision on if we were going to say yay or nay, we should move our audit out further or not. It was kind of made for us. I would just want that to be a point of record that we as a board didn't move it, even though we as a board pay for that.
Go ahead,
I
Bob.
can't not comment after that comment.
Sure,
Okay, so you could have, in all your infinite wisdom,
sure.
said, let's do the audit in September.
Okay.
We couldn't have done it in September. We didn't have numbers. We couldn't have done it. So you could have picked a date out of the air and it wouldn't have happened. And so reality is we had to push it back. There's nothing we could do. The audit company audits many, many towns, many municipalities. It's going to be started in about 2 weeks, right? Mid-January. And it takes them about 6 weeks to get the audit. And so the facts are the facts. We can go back and look and say, oh, we wish we could have got it sooner, but there were so many things that we didn't plan on. People leaving town, people leaving office. We didn't plan this. We didn't fire anybody.
Bob, where was the formal notification to this board that we were moving the audit?
Oh my God. You're kidding me.
Why not?
Okay.
It comes out of our line item on our budget for Board of Finance. We pay for the auditing service and the date got moved. I sat in the tri-board meeting. I was shocked as everybody else. We're moving it?
I'm shocked that you were shocked, to be honest with you.
Oh,
Because
well,
if you're,
I'll set a lower expectation
no,
next
because
time.
if the Board of Finance is paying attention, you know what's happening in town. I apologize that maybe you didn't get weekly reports, but you knew what was happening in town. It wasn't like it was something that was hidden. We weren't hiding people in closets and they weren't working. So you knew what was happening. We were trying to, you weren't getting your reports for a reason because we never really doing them. So,
I
so here we
definitely
are.
know
So
that
now
one.
you're saying to me that it's your call because you pay for the audit. It's out of your budget. I get it. But even though it's your call, it'd be an uneducated call to say, let's do it in September, October, if you didn't think, if you didn't know we couldn't do it at that. So you're saying we should have said to you, I don't know, with that tri-board meeting that we had when you were totally shocked about why you weren't getting your reports and how we were running business at the time with a very
Yeah.
skeleton crew,
Yeah.
right? At that point, and that was a September meeting, in
Okay.
that point, what did you think happened between September and December?
Oh, we hired a bunch of people and we got a bunch of stuff done and everything went along.
Right, but we
Well-
did that, but while we're doing that, we can't be ready for an audit. That's we were still trying to dig out of the hole. So
But unless you tell us formally saying, hey, just let you know, guys, we're not gonna make our date for the audit. We're gonna have to move the audit date. Are you guys good with it? Yeah, we're good with it. Okay.
Okay, I need to stop talking because I'm gonna see something to be sorry for later. And I
Let's-
and I
let's-
don't,
hey,
usually- I
let's
don't
leave
usually
this-
get to this point, but I'm getting that closely. So all I'm gonna say is I apologize. I should have given you a formal letter saying we're anticipating moving the audit. Do you agree? I'm sorry.
Mike,
I'm gonna bring the meeting back to order.
a question about the budget process. I know this has come up in the past. There's rules and about, we have to have a meeting in the certain week of the month in May and we have to have a vote. But I remember, I think Christine saying that that wasn't necessarily like absolutely, we had to stick to it. So if we're thinking that now we might be in at least 3 or 4 weeks behind, is that something that we can at least understand better to know what the actual rules are and what we can do?
Well, I think Suzanne had her hand up. I don't know if she wants to comment on that. I mean, the rules are that you have to have a certain time between a town hearing and a town meeting, and then between the town meeting and the referendum. We had years early on in my tenure that the referendum got pushed right back into June, which is not what we want to do. But if we find ourselves in March without being able to determine, we get the general government budget and we get the Board of Education budget, and we need to know what's in the undesignated fund because we're going to need to use money to get below 17%. So it's not necessarily it's not a good situation to do, but we could bump things back if we need to. But
So
I don't
my
want, I'm not
request
gonna,
is
I'm
just
not gonna
to
do that. at-
understand. I just want to make sure that we
prospectively.
understand what that process is.
So what if I can interject for a second, I agree. It's concerning that the audit is pushed out. There was nothing we could do about that. Things were not reconciled. There was nobody staffed to do this work. Right now, where we're at with the auditors coming in January, we have everything in place for them to do the audit. I'm confident that this will be done quickly and timely. And if not, we'll definitely communicate with the Board of Finance of what we have to do moving forward, how it's going to impact the budget and for the scheduled meetings and what have you. So I promise you, we will make sure the Board of Finance knows this and then we can plan accordingly. But Melissa has been working extremely hard on getting all this in line with the auditors. And once this happens in January, I can give you a report in January, by the end of January, where we're at.
Okay, Lou?
Into that, we have the unaudited numbers.
Correct.
And why would it be a problem to just continue with those unaudited numbers?
We're gonna have to.
Right, and just use that as the basis of what we do and ask if there's any significant findings in the initial look by the auditors that they advise us of that.
I'm hoping that they'll be able to give Suzanne and Melissa any initial feedback saying this doesn't look right or
Mhm.
what have you, that we could have information sooner.
So that there shouldn't be a material difference between what we have with unaudited numbers versus.
There
the
shouldn't
audited
be.
There shouldn't be.
No.
And especially if we can have that communication early on, then we can deal with it independent of having an audited financial statement.
Correct.
Just run from the unaudited. Not ideal, but given the circumstances, a workable solution, I think.
So my question would be to the Board of Ed. Is the Board of Ed budget ready for auditing?
I've never had anyone ask that question, nor have I heard that we weren't.
Well,
I think we talked about unaudited numbers at our last meeting. Kathy didn't give me the sense that she was concerned, but no one's ever asked me. And
you
so
guys
I've
are
never asked
ready.
Kathy.
You guys are ready for the audit.
I
and
don't
you're
want to
just waiting
represent
for-
that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think, I don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, but I'm happy to check in for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think just Winona, to tie a bow on the other conversation that you brought up, the rules are around the timings between the meetings. The risk to delaying is the tax bills have to go out, which influences revenue to the town. So I think we have some time when the audit comes in March. If we're seeing significant concerns in the audit, that could, imply maybe we shift that out. But I think the risk to delaying tax, like we just would weigh the risk to delaying the tax bill going out versus the risk of, sending it out too early if we need to revote because something concerning came up. That's all. You're like, I already knew all that. Thanks.
We have 9 meetings scheduled in March, and I guess maybe I'm being selfish and thinking, are we literally just gonna spin our wheels, the wheels come off and then we start over once the audit comes in? Like, that seems like a lot of time. So I want to make sure that we're kind of aware of everybody's commitments here.
No, we had many long discussions about booking so many meetings in March, and I was a big proponent of putting them on the board because you can always put them on the board and cancel them if we don't have things to talk about. But if we need to do one at short notice, it becomes a special meeting, and therefore we can only talk about what's on the special meeting notice. So personally, I'm fine booking it and hope for the best. I don't think anybody on this board, and if they do, I'd like to speak to them afterwards, plans on meeting every time in March for no particular reason.
Not at all. Suzanne?
Yes, I just wanted to say that we'll be working with the auditors closely and we'll get a preliminary where we're at. If they see any red flags or anything that they think is going to be a real issue, we're going to address it. And I can let you know that we still have some work to do. I mean, we just don't know. There's a lot of work that's being done in the last year. And but the auditors will let us know if they're seeing anything that we need to address right away. And I can convey that to the board. Absolutely.
All right, very good. Thank you. Anything else on item 6? Moving on to item number 7. Prepare for January Wheeler Library presentation. I put this on the agenda because I know we had our chance to each, as citizens, go see what the project's all about. Does anyone have anything that they want to discuss in preparation for the library preparing? We have Amy Kennedy's here if there's any questions that you guys want answered, maybe she can provide them. We're not here to discuss how we're determining things, just what we're looking for to have beforehand. Go ahead, anybody.
Yeah, just so Stephanie doesn't think I was picking on her. I think would love to see a plan, and it doesn't have to be like the plan of the restoration, but like what's the plan of all the steps? I know you have multiple grants you're working on, and kind of like that higher level timeline and understanding of, how does library starting from A and getting to Z, what's the thought process there? We know there's going to be things that you don't know yet and you're not ready to answer, and that's totally okay. We just kind of like understand, similar to the conversation I had with Stephanie, right? Just like understand what's your first step, your second step, your final step, and where you're going. So thank you in advance for that.
It would be good if we had what's it?
You're not on.
Yeah. If we had if we had an idea as to what's to be presented, because it feels like we meet, we talk, we go over our separate corners, we come back, and I would like to not frustrate the library and the library board if we have questions that they didn't anticipate. So if we had an idea as to what is being planned to present, we'd have an idea whether it's going to meet what we're expecting or not. Some of us met private tours at the library, gave some feedback. I do, there's an elephant in the room that I expect the Board of Selectmen to actually formally engage on, and that is, sorry, Bob, I know you're in a bad spot. This isn't going to help. However, it's been said a couple times in presentations that it's the library's expectation that they would get annual municipal funding to the level of 1% of the town revenue to meet their budget, and they're working towards that. And I think it's important that the town recognizes whether that's truly something that the town is going to step up to, because the funding approach that was described involved taking some of the endowment and applying it towards this project, which I understand, but that's only going to increase the gap in the operating budget to whatever revenue was thrown from that endowment. So I think before, and I appreciate how you voted for this. You said it's a good project. I'm going to send it to the Board of Finance, let them ask the hard questions. I think it's important that the Board of Selectmen answer that hard question. Are you guys ready? You don't, and it should go to you, Nicole and Brett. It shouldn't just be you, Bob. But are you ready to absorb what the reduction in the endowment revenue would cost? And that would come in the next 2 years based on what the schedule of the project is. And the other is, do you fully intend to fund the library to 1% of the annual revenues of the town going forward? Where's Brett?
Got it. All right, so let's talk about that process. So the library will be presenting to the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen as part of their budget, which is what the line you're talking about, sometime, I think, in February. So we have the ambulance and the fire company and so on. They're one of the presenters. They'll present to us that evening what that number is. It's been 100,000 in the last 2 years, I believe. That'll go to the Board of Selectmen, as we always do. We'll vet out our budget before you see it. So whether that number stays at what they ask for, or whether it gets vetted out by the selectmen and gets lowered, then that's going to happen before you even see the number. But you'll be part of the process, because I think starting at Winona's suggestion last year, the year before, we give you every rendition of the budget. So you see where the original ask was, and then you'll see what happens to it. Because we're probably going to vet out that budget 2 or 3 times at 2 or 3 different meetings before it gets to you.
I understand the process, and I'm way with you. I'm looking at outside of the budget cycle, the decision to do the project with the funding mechanism that was previously identified to us, meaning taking $500,000 or so from the library's endowment, is going to reduce the financial contribution that the library can cover of their own, by their own for the operating budget. So de facto, by approving this, the town contribution is going to go up for that opportunity
If
lost.
it's approved. So
Yeah.
that's the idea. So I understand exactly what
Okay.
Amy said that evening.
Yeah.
I understand what the forecast is and what the expectation is. It's still, the bottom line is each year that line comes in front of the Board of Selectmen to be discussed. So each year we'll be taking that line, whatever that number is that the library asked for, just like everybody else asked for money, and we vet it out. So there's nothing saying in this project that oh, by the way, you're going to get the money for the project, $1 million, and we will hit that number every year. That's not part of the agreement. They're 2 different things.
Okay, as long as the Board of Selectmen recognize the implication of the funding approach, it just seemed to, I don't know whether it was
I don't
lost in
think,
the wiffle
I
dust or
see
not.
where it's tied together in your mind as far as one is the outcome of the other.
Yeah.
But the Board of Selectmen will be looking at 2 different things. One is the yearly ask in the budget that we vet out, and one is the ask for this particular project. But yeah, so I don't think that, we're not going to say on this line, well, let's give it to the Board of Finance and let them decide. We're going to have that vetted out before it gets to it.
I worry about the trajectory we set the library on by moving forward. So, we meet the gap for the project and the project goes forward, and then we can't meet their operating needs year to year going forward
Mhm.
after that because the endowment's been reduced
So,
X amount.
so let's say the library asks for 150,000.
Yep.
And the Board of Selectmen says, no, we can't afford that in this budget. Budget's too tight. We're going to go back down to what it was last year.
Yep.
That $50,000 gap is now up to the library to figure out how they're going to fill that gap. It's not up to the town. Unless the town says, yes, you can have the 150. But if there's a gap because we lowered it, that's now back in the library to figure
Okay,
that out.
as long as people have eyes on that.
But does the library understand that?
The library-
That's my biggest worry is they're gonna
I think-
see the drawdown on the endowment. They're gonna have a smaller amount that come out of the endowment, which is what they use to supplement their operating budget, correct, Gary?
Mhm.
So yes, that line item is solely your discretion if you want to cut it, raise it, or however you want to do it. However, they're not going to be able to take money from their normal revenue streams to be able to supplant that. If we just say the last 2 years, you said it was $100,000. Well, they could be like, all right, well, we only had to come up with 20,000. Well, if they draw down that endowment, it could actually be that they actually have to come up with $40,000 on top of that.
No, I agree. I understand the math and I understand exactly what you and Gary are saying. But still the question is they and everybody else that asked for a line in the budget, they asked for a line. It's up to the town to decide, can we afford it or we can't? And that's when it gets vetted out by our board first, then your board.
I think it's important to, for this particular process right now, we have Amy here. I know you, correct me if I'm wrong, we're planning to get a packet of materials prior to the presentation. 5 days ahead. Part of, you know, whatever you guys heard when people visited there as citizens individually and questions that they brought up, I imagine will be addressed in the packet. This is another thing that obviously is a serious question, and I think the board should be prepared to answer that question appropriately. Does anyone else have anything else for Amy that they feel like they want in the packet or they're expecting to be answered on the 29th so they can prepare better? Go ahead.
I'd like to see the information about the really things you need to do. There's some nice things that can happen there, but then there's other things at the library that really need to happen from my tour that I took with you. And I maybe prioritize those as to how you're looking at resolving some of those issues, like the water issue for one. So that would help me get a better understanding about how much is built into this project, the real foundational things that
You're
really
talking about
need to
needs
happen.
versus wants?
Yeah, exactly. And then how much of it would just be an enhancement to the building? And I'd like to get a sense about what that looks like. But other than that,
Anybody else?
I personally would like to understand if the library would be open to having a written commitment to the town in exchange for any funds that the library would remain open to the public and not become privatized as to require membership or any type of thing like that, so that if town funds are utilized, that the townspeople have free access on a go-forward basis, whether that's 50 years or 100 years or something that equates to the amount of money that we could potentially be offering up.
Gary?
And I mentioned it on the taxpayer tour, but I'm going to mention it again here, so just so it's formalized. The Board of Finance needs to know, when does the commitment need to be made for the town's match? And when is it going to actually be paid? Because we got to figure out how we, you know, if this goes forward, how we're going to fold it into the budgets. They're two different things. I mean, we're going to make a commitment, I'm assuming up front, and I, you know, I want to see where it says we have to make it a commitment and when. And then we need to see in a project schedule when those funds are going to be allocated out. Yeah, dispersed. Thank you.
Associated with those funds and everything. So it looks like they're gonna have like probably 3 revenue streams, hypothetically, or 4. Where does our money, the town money, fall into the burn rate of spending? Is it pledged money first, then it's, you know, endowment money next, and then it's state money next, or is it state money first? Then what is the waterfall burn for that? And we just say it's a $4 million project and we say we're up to $1 million, but they only spent $3.2 million of it. You know, where does the town funds fall into that? That's where I would want to see. Are we more the backdrop of, you know, final portions of it, or is it more where towards the beginning? Where do we fall into the burn rate of that?
It's a good question. I would think that if you're providing up to a certain amount of money that you are on the back end, but no, those are questions that can be answered that night and preferably in the packet. Anything else?
Actually, this is probably just for our board. So we're gonna be discussing this on the 29th. We're gonna get the presentation, gonna talk to Daryl on the 29th. What is our expectation? How long do we think as a board that we're gonna have to come up with a decision? Because obviously there's a, you know, timeframe that they're gonna need something done. Are we talking it's gonna take, you know, presentation, talk to Daryl, and then this is gonna bleed into another meeting? How many meetings do we think that this is gonna take?
Does anyone have the budget calendar?
Oh, yeah. As long as it doesn't go into March.
I'm just saying, no, I'm sorry, I'm talking about presentations. Does anyone who has,
Oh.
It's also
Do we
gonna,
have
I
it in
think,
budget calendar?
we do have a budget.
it's also
calendar.
gonna have to, they have to know about the commitment for the state grant, I believe.
They do.
So they have to,
Correct.
whatever that date is when we're gonna have to be done by.
That's gonna be part of the present, I believe,
Okay,
you know, they don't get the funds from the state unless they get the commitment from the town.
We go to the 29th and then it bleeds into February. God forbid if we have a snow day or however this is gonna work. And then it's probably gonna go to referendum or however we're gonna have it go forward. That all takes time. It has to go in the paper, it has to do this. You know, I know what Gary's talking about, where it is, I hope it doesn't go into March, but realistically, it could be going into March, especially for a vote.
Yeah, what are we doing on February 5th? Is somebody presenting to us?
Budget presentation to Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen for Public Works, EDC Land Use, and the Fire Company.
Yeah, so
That'll be
booked up on that one.
What about the 19th?
Wheeler Library, NSAA, Rec Commission, and registrars.
All right, that's a shorter meeting. I just think, you know, we're probably looking at some preliminary discussions on the 29th. We're not going to be making a decision at that point. More discussions. It's going to be on the agenda for the 5th. It'll be on the agenda for the 19th. And what's that?
We would just list it on the agenda until it gets done, right?
Correct.
So,
just-
it
I
would-
don't necessarily want to go past the 19th and making a decision to,
But this is where it's gonna go. It's like, we're gonna make a decision, which is say worst case on the 19th, and then it's gonna go, and it's gonna go back to the board of selectmen. Selectmen are gonna call a referendum now, or a town meeting, and then what is the timetable for it to go to town meeting and then referendum, if it does go to a referendum, or how do you guys plan on that portion of it?
That's all gonna come out of what they present to us. 'Cause we
If
don't-
it,
understand,
if
but-
it comes back to the Board of Selectmen, we'll call for a public hearing, which would be a fairly big meeting. We might even use the gymatorium.
Yeah,
From that, we'll go to a town meeting, and then the town meeting will be already arranged that it will not be voted on. And in the town meeting, there'll be a referendum question attached to that.
but that,
So it depends if it comes back from the Board of Finance to us. So I'm looking at probably sometime in April for a town meeting and referendum. I don't want to get it too close to the budget itself.
Yeah,
which
you
is
talk about
what you typically do.
probably mid-April timeframe.
Early to mid-April, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
would you guys be, we haven't submitted this calendar yet.
Gonna change it again.
You signed it, but you
We're
didn't
gonna
submit
shoot
it.
the edge of
Signed on
sketch.
If you're going, I feel like we need another meeting. I don't want to be having this discussion during meetings that we're getting budget presentations, given the significance of the investment and the importance of it to the town. I think it deserves its own day, own meeting.
It's gonna cause me a heartache.
Would you guys be willing to add a date on February 10th? It's Monday. I don't, is this room used on Mondays?
Just bring the mic to your desk.
So, yeah, but I'm not on camera. So, yeah, typically Monday is EDC, but they only meet once a month and they can meet that back room if they don't have to meet here.
Okay,
We can usually fit somebody in on a Monday.
all right.
Mike, was
Yes.
that presented to us from the Board of Selectmen as, how was it gonna be funded? Or do we have discrepancy on how to fund it? In other words, can we, if we can't take it out of the designated fund, can we tell them that we'll bond it? Who's gonna come up with that funding idea? Because if we're in a spot right now with the Board of Education and something else happens, I don't think we ought to pull all of that money out of that account just yet. But if we had it set up so that we were pulling a smaller amount out of that account every year for 10 years, if it went wherever it came from. In other words, borrow the money, pay for it as we use it, so that we don't take a lump sum out of that account.
If I remember the original conversation we had on that, us being our own bank and basically bankroll, I think they needed that money all cash in full at the
Mhm.
beginning.
So you'd
Of
have
the
to go to a
project.
bond.
You'd have to, but that's the stuff that I would expect that would be kind of discussed that, hey, we need this amount of money by this date.
Then
I
we-
don't
okay.
know if we make that
Money?
decision.
So I disagree with what you're saying, Dan,
Yeah.
because, you know, if we have our non-lapsing or whatever you want to call it, and we're making a commitment of $1 million, we
Yeah.
can use that as our internal bank and we don't necessarily need the bond.
I think we discussed this prior when this was presented to us, where when they asked, when we were talking about, hey, how can we do it over 10 years
Yeah,
or whatever?
yeah.
I thought that the state, proof of funds, they wanted to see the money. Like, hey, this is what we got right
Yeah,
here.
but we do have it.
We do have it, but they want it encumbered. They want it,
Oh,
they
they
want
want it
it,
locked up.
they want to see it locked up.
They wanted a
as
mechanism. Yeah,
whole.
yeah. Okay.
Because like you were saying, not saying we're gonna default on the undesignated fund, but
Right.
you have to be able to show proof of funds right then and there.
But to clarify that, you could do that by way of a reserve.
Yep.
You could just and I don't know if this is what would happen or not, but one way to do that, to make that commitment, is to say that we have allocated this portion of our fund and we will not touch that for any other purpose other than funding the library. That, from an accounting standpoint, that would accomplish a commitment. I think the state would accept something like that.
I would be wondering if it even
We
meets
would
state
need to-
statute.
so-
I would wonder
so-
if it meets state statute for the undesignated fund,
So
that
I-
we can have a long-term encumbered debt.
I'd like to hear the ask before we start trying to solution it.
I-
But-
I'm
but- well,
Sorry to
no,
open a can of worms. I was just
Yeah, no,
curious.
but
No, I think
however, what I
also-
was gonna say to Mike, to the question at hand, typically I'm not a fan of special meetings, but this is ideal for a special meeting
Yeah.
because there'd be one agenda topic.
It won't
And
go
we
off
set a
track.
special meeting when we decide if we need one.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that.
And,
I thought the same thing, like, this is a good special meeting type
Yep.
Makes it
situation.
clean.
and I would like, I don't know if this is what you were getting at, but the question that's coming to us is not if we should approve the project, because that's, I guess, for the town to decide. It's whether or not the town can afford it.
Mhm.
Right.
That's our charge, right? Can the town afford to support the library?
And I would also
to this
think it would
regard.
be how we can afford it, not can we afford it,
Well,
how we would afford it.
how would you fund it?
Right.
Yes, yeah. So that's our question. Can we afford it?
Do we have any other? Sure.
I think there's 6 members on the board and 2 alternates, right? Is that
Correct.
right? So what happens if it's a tie vote? What happens if it's split 3-3?
It doesn't,
3-3 doesn't move
it doesn't
forward.
pass.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Anything else further on what we're looking for Amy and the board to provide? Thanks for being here, Amy. All right, let's, minutes.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as drafted.
You gotta state the date.
Wait a minute.
We have Wynona's long awaited for October 16, 2024 minutes. Very well done, by the way.
I'm using
I
yours as a
mean,
template,
It's
actually.
worth the wait. And we had the proposed draft schedule. That's when we first did it. I mean, the
Wow.
budget schedule. I move to approve the October 16, 2024 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And we have $11.20, is that the one? Did we do that one already? No, that Amy,
12:04. We'll wait for warm weather.
There's only one.
I didn't bring my last agenda.
Do you guys have Copilot yet as part of your Microsoft license?
11:20.
Yeah.
You asked us this.
We haven't approved that yet, right?
Or if you can ask your,
Okay, we
IT
did.
team.
we
Bob, I'm
approved
your
them.
co-pilot.
What's the question again?
I'll send you an email.
And then
Never
we're just
mind.
waiting for yours. Okay. All right, we're all set on minutes. We're waiting for Dan's from last meeting.
No, I don't like doing minutes.
Are there any public comment? Seeing none, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.